Hey folks, today we're covering Dev Diary 175 for Crusader Kings 3, and this week we're going to be talking about Japan, Korea, and the 3 new government types that will be introduced with the All Under Heaven DLC for this area. So on top of the China governments and the Southeast Asia government that we know we're getting, there's a lot of new government types coming to Crusader Kings. What's this, like 5 new ones at least that we're getting in this DLC? I mean, a lot of them are just variants of admin or something like that, but we'll cover all that in the Dev Diary today. So anyway, let's just get straight into it. The first section here is called The Land of the Rising Sun, just giving us an overview of Japan, especially in 867. There's a big influence from China and the hegemony system that they have, but Japan is a separate entity, but it does have those influences from Japan. We'll see that in how this government works and how it plays out a little bit. It's not exactly the same, but you'll see the similarities as they kind of point out here. They do point out here that the north and south of the island aren't really part of this like homogenized Japan as much as it was in this time frame. There are some tribes to the north, there are some tribes in the south, tribal government types, and you are going to be able to play as those. Kind of funny they point out here, famed for their horse archers, so 2 DLCs in a row with a lot of horse archers. Well, I say 2 in a row. We've got coronations to come before this DLC does come out. But next they're going to show us the map here. You can see it is a lot less red than it was in some earlier screenshots. They do say this is based on the wisteria flower and they made it this more purple color. So it is different in a little bit from China. So it doesn't look like it's just one big, huge kind of red realm for the most part. You'll be able to see that Japan, as you can see in the screenshot, is more purpley. There's some yellows in there as well. A little bit of orange, just to make it stand out. I mean, it is a huge island on the east coast, but you know, make it stand out even more than that will. The next section is called A Fragile Peace. During the period of the game, Japan transitioned from a peaceful bureaucratic realm held by aristocratic families to a military shogunate dominated by the samurai families, but still a largely unwarlike place, far from the more militarized Japan that would happen later in its history. Amongst all this, there is obviously the ruling emperor, nominally the head of state, but whose power varies considerably depending on the circumstances. The Yamato dynasty has held this position in an unbroken line from ancient times up to the present day. So that is pretty crazy if you think about it. One dynasty has just run Japan for all this time, but they are going to cover a little bit more around that later on in this Dev Diary. You can see in the next screenshot how Japan looks in 1066. So you've got the Ritsuryo government type, you've got the Soyo government type, you've got tribal, and then you can just see that kind of like burnt orangey yellow color for Korea, and that is going to be covered later on. There is the Meritocratic government type that is the third one that we will be talking about today. But the first one of those we are going to talk about is the Ritsuryo system. In the earlier start dates, the peace eras are in full swing, following the emperor's establishment of the aptly named Kyoto in 794 as the capital. This bustling city palace is the center of government bureaucracy and home of the imperial family, with the manors of the aristocratic families close at hand. Yes, we're getting more manors in Japan. They're going to cover that later on in the Dev Diary. Taking inspiration from China, Ritsuryo is the legal framework of Japan, and as in China, the many provinces of Japan are assigned governors. Along with the many branches of the Fujiwara family, other families of note will compete for appointments and recognition within the realm. Unlike China, however, the government is de facto directed by a regent ruling on behalf of the emperor. For gameplay purposes, they've simplified the naming distinctions between regents or underage emperors, the Sesho, and the adult emperors under the unified name of Kenpaku. Though nominally a regent, a Kenpaku is not a diarch relationship with the emperor, and both characters may have their own diarch when relevant. So you could have like 2 regents with the 2 different kind of nominal emperors of Japan by the sounds of it anyway. It does sound like it's going to be interesting to play here, especially with these mechanics going on. Historically, the position of regent was totally dominated by the main line of the Fujiwara family, who tended to minimize the influence of the imperial family beyond the ceremonial roles and maintaining the preeminence among nobility. The Fujiwara were an extremely prolific family whose influence and sheer size essentially dwarfed those of the other families, with almost 500 living members in 1178. Playing a different bureaucratic family attempting to unseat the Fujiwara is a great challenge in itself, although not impossible. I get a feeling we'll get an achievement based around that. We'll get one that's like not starting as a Fujiwara dynasty member, unseat them and get that role within Japan. I'd put good money on that. Let me know in the comments down below in like 6 months if we don't get that achievement. But anyway, in the next screenshot, you're going to see that system in practice. You can see the Empire of Japan, the succession of the Empire of Japan. Succession law is regency succession, the current holder, and then you can see all the modifiers here that will take effect in here. Things around ceremonial regions, ceremonial houses. They're going to cover a bunch of that in the Dev Diary today. I will call out here, as you can see that huge kind of icon, work in progress. Everything we see here is work in progress. There is a screenshot later on with this badge on it like 6 times with arrows. So everything, again, is work in progress. This isn't how it's going to look at launch. They're just wanting to give us that early access to the DLC so we can give our feedback and kind of know what's coming. But you can see this list here, very similar to like the house list within the Byzantines. Kind of similar how this is going to work, but you can see it there in that UI. So becoming Kampaku works similar to the acclamation system in the Byzantines and can be directly raised or lowered by spending influence, but it also has a unique system of specific weights related to the Imperial family, the blocs, which they're going to cover in a second in the dev diary. And then next, the province map in this example. It looks really good. I really like how Japan looks. Obviously a very mountainous place. If you love diving armies into mountainous battles, you're going to have a great time in this map. But look how nice it looks. I really like it. I think there is some flavor to the UI, but I'm sure it'll stand out even further when we get our hands on this DLC. But I like how Japan's looking. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Provinces are largely county tier appointments, and generally a governor cannot hold more than one of these at a time. So kind of how it works in the Byzantines, but even smaller kind of landmass that you will control. This represents the historic Ritsuryo provinces, or the Kuni of Japan, and the fragmented power that each official actually had. Although all historical provinces are represented as countries in the game, there are a few exceptions that were too small or had to be incorporated into a neighbour. So there are a few little changes here, just because one of these provinces was so small, it wouldn't make sense for it to actually be on the map. So they have made some consolidation here, but it sounds like they've done the best they can to make it show on the map as it would have done historically. By default, the Ritsuryo rulers cannot create duchies or kingdoms in Japan, even the Kampaku. Shrewd houses may instead fill many appointments with their own members, leveraging their power as a united family rather than individuals, a theme common and that we will see in all the Japanese features. So again, this is going to play out differently, I guess a little bit more like the Byzantines, where you're not going to be going to war for all these places for the most part. You're going to be trying to put your dynasty and your house members into these kind of seats and then building up your power that way. Is it going to be more fun than the Byzantines or less? We'll find out at launch. The next thing they're going to show here, yes, the manors are back. They're always here. They're always in the background, just waiting to spring out to us whenever we get a new government type. Again, the art looks fantastic. I've talked about my issues with this system in a couple of the recent videos, so I won't go over it again too much here. I just dislike how these are never-ending stacks on your stats. You've got this rolling power creep, which can never really get taken off you. I do think we should get like schemes or raids or besieging. If it is in that location, you can like knock down the buildings a little bit. So there's some counteract to this system in the gameplay. But anyway, I won't get bogged down with that argument once again. But as you can see, the manor is a new type of domicile, unique to the Japanese government, as they say here. I mean, super unique now in the game. Soryo government types, which they're going to talk about in a second, is the only non-admin government type that has access to an estate-style domicile. I mean, is it? Nomads have the same thing. I know it's not a manor, it's a moving manor, basically. I don't know if I really agree with that. Maybe they don't mean it in the way I'm reading it. So I don't know. Again, let me know what you think, but I think that's a little bit cheeky there, how that's worded. And this building retains any upgrades when switching between the Japanese government types. So if you switch from Soryo to Ritsuryo, you will keep the buildings. I wonder if they changed the stats slightly, but you don't have to rebuild the whole thing if you switch between the two systems. Some building chains are only locked by certain house aspirations, which they're going to talk about later on as well. So kind of how we saw it with China. Some of these buildings are going to be locked behind certain things. Again, let me know what you think about manor systems. I don't mind them ultimately, but I feel like they should not be in every type of content we get. It sounds like in the Southeast Asia government type, we're also going to get a version of this. It's going to be like your big holy temple, but basically works the same way. Anyway, next they're going to cover the chrysanthemum throne. Though historically the emperor's been largely sidelined, the Yamado family is still an influential political force. Over time, it even became common for emperors to become monks, abdicating their throne to their heir to escape the direct responsibilities from the throne while still influencing politics as so-called cloistered emperors. In All Under Heaven, the emperor is a playable character, a member of the Yamado family who holds a noble family manor, much like the Ritsuryo rulers, and has their own royal court. The emperor is only a valid candidate for the regency of Japan itself, while other members of the Yamado family are valid candidates only for governorships. So you can play as the emperor, but you can also play as the people who actually have power in Japan. So you're going to be able to play Japan in a couple of different ways, which is going to be pretty interesting. You can see this on the screenshot here. You can see the current emperor here. He's 41. Nothing else really calls out here different to what we see in the game at the moment. You can see the liege, the player heir. You can see obviously their dynasty. You can see their religion, you can see their admin ability, stuff like that. If an emperor does manage to take the top title by influence, they will receive an event where they are given the option to abdicate and rule Japan as a powerful cloistered emperor, or attempt to hold on to both titles, representing the historical possibility of renewed direct rule, though doing so will not be well received by the chattering classes. I guess that means like all the clan rulers. They're not going to be too happy if you have both of these roles. Historically, many branches of the Yamato family were eventually disinherited to prune the royal ranks, just like players do in CK3. They took new names, and the most famous being the Tara or the Minamoto houses, which are identified by which emperors they descended from. In Crusader Kings 3, Yamato governors can form or join these houses, organically creating new branch families, so similar to what you can do already with cadet branches, things like that by the sounds of it. The next thing they're going to talk about, they already mentioned the Imperial policies. The sitting top liege of Japan, be they Kampaku, Shogun, or Tenno, always has access to unique law categories, the Imperial policies, and these are issued in the name of the emperor. Despite the relative political stability, the policies of Japanese government varied substantially throughout the era of the game, as bureaucracies were replaced and external policies changed. Like Crown Authority in the game, Imperial policies can be changed freely besides having a cooldown. There's many of these policies available, suited to different objectives and situations, coming with wide-reaching edicts, which can substantially change the gameplay in the Japanese island. For example, rulers in the Empire of Japan are not able to freely declare external wars, representing the general lack of ambition at this time to expand the borders outside of the northern part of Japan. However, by implementing the Imperial expansion policy, the usual inter-realm casus belli available elsewhere in the game may be unlocked, along with a reduction to the cost of mercenaries and men-at-arms. So if you are playing as the top tier here, you can keep things mostly internal, well, pretty much entirely internal, but if you do change the policy, and you can see that on the screen now, you can do these external wars and start spreading Japan onto the mainland, really, and see what adventures you can get up to and see what your vassals get up to. So again, you can kind of shape the way the game plays out in this area, depending on which of these policies you do implement whilst you're in charge. Other policies change the balance between the government types in Japan or provide simple situational benefits at an opportunity cost of having not implemented these policies. Conversely, if Japan ever finds itself under true threat from an external invasion, the defense mobilization policy will become available, providing an extra edge and advantage and allowing Ritsuryo rulers access to the usual Soryo limited mounted samurai horse archer men-at-arms. So yes, you can't escape horse archers anywhere in the eastern side of the map by the sounds of it. You're going to get these special mounted samurais that are going to help you defend Japan against an external threat that will be coming towards you. I wonder, similar to like religious holy orders, if you can use these against other rulers. It does say they're available to the Soryo usually, so I guess they can use them against other rulers. I wonder if you are a Ritsuryo ruler and you have these during an invasion of Japan, if you can then use them against other rulers within the Japanese realm. It doesn't say so here, so I guess we'll have to wait and find out. The next thing they're going to talk about is something else they've already mentioned, and that is the house aspiration system. Each house in Japan has an aspiration similar to the house powers of the Byzantines, representing the character and goals of the family as a whole. Each aspiration has several levels, each granting a new boon or a new power or some stats or something like that. The house head may spend prestige to increase the level of the current aspiration or even change its type, which will start it from the lowest one once again, and then start your kind of like moving up these ranks if you do change the type that you have. You can see here, ceremony is one of these examples. The feast activity is cheaper to host. Characters are more likely to accept marriage offers, may construct the tea house Japanese manor building, and then you can see the stats for the noble house members, and then just the house members as well. So very similar to other modifiers we see. You know, Crusader Kings slowly turning into one of those just modifier stacking games. I say that half jokingly, but there's so many systems here. I guess there's no other way for them to differentiate these systems easily, I guess. But like every system just has these different stats. I'm sure there's going to be some kind of like crazy meta build where you have certain house aspirations, certain dynasty unlocks, certain house buildings, all these things, and you're going to be able to stack like diplomacy up to like 40 or 50 on a character, something crazy like that. But as you can see, this is how it's going to work. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about this. Again, I'm not too sure about it. I guess it's going to be perfectly fine, but it is very similar to other things that we have seen before. But I guess that also kind of makes sense as well. Each type of aspiration is focused on a different area, with some more suited to certain government types than others. Service grants bonuses to governor efficiency and candidate score, and is a good pick for those who wish to climb up the system and serve the emperor. Ceremony grants bonuses to prestige and renown generation, a sure choice for the noblest of families. Strength improves men-at-arms and martial skills, ensuring dominance on the battlefield. Beyond the bonuses granted, the aspiration a house chooses will also determine the political goals to a certain extent and is the driving force behind another feature, and they're going to talk about that later on, and that is the house blocks. The next feature they're going to talk about is house relations. They do call out this is going to be part of the free patch, so I guess everything we've seen so far around China and everything on Japan so far is going to be paid. I'm presuming that's the case because this is the first time they've called out the free patch, but we'll see. And this is, as I said, the house relation system. This works very similar to the character relations like rivals and friends, but these are between two houses rather than two characters. Now with this system, and you can see on the screen now, whenever a friendly or hostile action is taken between houses within the same realm or a similar rank, such as declaring wars or arranging marriages, the relation between the two houses will increase or decrease. And as I said, you can see that on the screen here. You can see rivalry, friendly, friendly. You can see the different things that happened here, the rivalry description, and then these different tiers they're going to talk about in a second. With this being part of the free patch, I wonder if this will come to elsewhere in the game, because you have like these house rivalries. It came in that DLC, but where you could have these house rivalries, you'd end up just murdering each other, and then they would eventually die off. I wonder if this system will come in so that's a little bit more visible, and then also you'll just be able to see like, oh, this is a dynasty I've interacted with a lot, or a house I've interacted with a lot. Maybe I'll stick around with them, or maybe they've done something bad to me, so I'm going to make sure I do something bad to them in the future. I hope this does come game-wide because I would love to be able to see this elsewhere. And then as I previously mentioned, there are 7 levels to this system, and they go from feud to amity, and each rank of these moves the opinion in one way or the other, depending if you're friend or foe. Each level will also unlock bonuses or modifiers to standard gameplay when interacting with the other house, such as allowing free negotiation of alliances or reducing the cost of all wars. I guess it might also make it so like marriages are easier because again the two houses kind of remember each other or, you know, don't like each other, however that's going to play out. I wonder if it will affect schemes as well. I guess it probably will do. The next screenshot is the one I was talking about. It's got like, what, 5 of those icons saying it's work in progress, and this is going to be the history version of this system. So you can see here, no historical events, 1 member's marrying, 2 members marrying, and you can see the modifiers that is giving. So again, work in progress, but it looks like we are going to get a log, kind of how like the memory system works for characters. We're going to get that, but for these houses, and you can be able to see what's happened historically between you. And then next they're going to talk about this block system they mentioned earlier. With a fragmented political map inside of Japan, they wanted a better way to depict the various political groups and a way for them to defend each other outside of the traditional alliance system, maintaining the fragile peace that often prevailed in this era in Japan. So it looks like this is a version almost of like the faction system, but we'll see as they explain it out here. So house blocks are their solution to what they were just talking about and will work similar to confederations added in Khans of the Steppe, but with houses as members rather than characters. A leading house acts as a decision maker in this block, while the other houses are considered willing cooperators. The house head of the leading house gets to decide which houses are allowed in the block and may also expel other houses as they see fit. And you can see that in the next screenshot. You can see the block on the left hand side, the different houses, all the different flags there of the houses. And then you can see on the map side as well, you can see the different blocks that have kind of taken effect here. I guess it does look very like the Confederation system. These are going to ebb and flow depending on what policies you've got, depending on what you're trying to do. You'll join or leave one of these blocks, and then you're kind of allied together in whatever you're trying to get up to. Each house block will have a cohesion value with the added bonuses of all members unlocked to keep this value high. Cohesion is based on the number and governments of the member houses, whether their house aspirations match that of the leading house, and then also the relationships between the member houses. So that's why they've brought in that house system they were talking about earlier, where you can track these relationships. I guess it helps with this system as well. So yes, if you change government type, if you change your house aspiration, you might fall out of favor of one block, or you might choose to leave it, and then you might join a different block if you do want to align with a different one of these blocks. The aspiration in the leading house kind of acts like the defining principle of the block. A strength focus block will seek to expand its military power. The aspiration of a house is not generally limited by the government type, and various combinations are possible. Generally, multiple blocks led by houses of the same aspiration type are not common, with interest coalescing around the most able leadership instead. So you're not going to get this very house dominated by the sounds of it. These different blocks are going to be led by different houses, different dynasties. I'm sure we'll see some that are the same, but it looks like they're going to try avoid that from happening. Crucially, block members will automatically join the factions of the house head of their block's leading house, increase their succession score for the Kenpaku if they are Ritsuryo, and also join in their defensive wars, including tyranny wars started by attempts at imprisonment or revocation. This makes challenging a block something to consider carefully, and any wars that do occur are far more impactful than they would be if Japanese vessels were merely isolated county tier rulers with scattered alliances. I will agree with that. This system does sound like it brings up these confederation type blocks together. They are more shifting than typical alliances would be, and you will see these kind of play out organically as you have these house interactions. As different houses change their government type, it sounds like you might see some changes here. Makes it a lot more interesting than if it was just counts and dukes, you know, that feudal gameplay, which really will need an update once this chapter of DLC has released. In addition, acquiring governorships for members of a house within your block, be they your own or others, can directly aid in strengthening your factions and succession score or prevent attacks on your position, while being without a block will leave you worryingly exposed to your enemies. So you're not going to last very long in Japan if you try go on alone. You're going to want to get into one of these blocks, otherwise you're going to get removed, you're going to be deposed yourself, something bad's going to happen. You want to play this system so you can progress as you continue your house or dynasty through Japan. The next section is called The Rise of the Bushi. As the Heian era wore on, many noble families, frustrated by the fierce competition for appointments with the Fujiwara, despaired of the ever-climbing of the bureaucratic ranks and instead left the capital, establishing manors in their provinces. Far from the aristocrats of the capital, the power of these families eventually grew to the point where they ruled de facto as hereditary local nobility. They represented this in-game by allowing Ritsuryo rulers to establish a held appointment as a fief, switching their government type to Soryo. This is considered a crime by the Kenpaku, and all Ritsuryo governors will be able to use a casus belli, which will return the title. However, Soryo rulers pack more than a punch than bureaucrats. They have access to the mounted samurai, horse archer, men-at-arms type. In addition, Soryo rulers will generally band together to defend themselves, making resisting their spread a less simple proposition. So I guess as more of them convert to this, you kind of bound together, as it says, make these alliances, and then you will try resist or fight off the other government type in Japan. And then next they're going to show us the 1178 start date, and then they say at this point almost all of Japan was effectively outside of the reach of the Ritsuryo apparatus, instead now dominated by these new families, most notably the Tara and Minamoto houses. And then they say here, if you start in Japan in 1178, the head of the most powerful house, the Kiyomori, has effectively supplanted the power of the Fujiwara, ruling as a de facto dictator over Japan in a role that would become the shogun. And then they say actually 2 years after this start date, so in 1180, a major war did happen, and that led to the establishment of the very first shogunate in Kamakura. So that's some cool history to have here. So you can play that out, see if you can have the shogun, or maybe you want to be on the other side of this and not have the shogun happening, and see if you can keep Japan in kind of like the old ways. And with that, that is the end of the Japanese section of this dev diary. Let me know what you think. There's a lot of information there, how the houses are going to work, these inter-house mechanics they're going to have, the blocks, the manors, all these things. I'm sure we'll get more dev diaries around these before we do get the release of this DLC, but that is our initial look at it. For the rest of the dev diary, they're going to talk about Korea, and that is going to be the three kingdoms. Like Japan, the Korean peninsula is very interesting as it is also in a very Chinese-influenced region, but with its own deep cultural and political history. Though it is greater exposed to invasion from various states and tribes which lay to its north, it is a fairly developed mountainous region, and any threats will struggle to gain a foothold. And then in the next screenshot, you can see that on screen. You can see the lands of Korea, you can see some of the coat of arms, you can see the ruler. Again, similar to the Japanese screenshots, I don't see anything here that's crazy different than what we've seen from other admin government types, and this government type is going to play out as a variant of that system as well. And in the earliest 867 start date, the three factions that are kind of endlessly at war in Korea have ultimately seen one side victorious, and that is the Sealer realm. However, this status quo will not last long. A resurgent aristocracy under the Wang dynasty will ultimately overthrow the Sealer, establishing the United Kingdom of Goryeo, ruling the entire peninsula until the establishment of the Joseon dynasty in the late 14th century. Again, something recently covered in the EU5 dev diaries. Meanwhile, soon after Sealer fell, the region of Belay was conquered by the Khitan nomads, who would later establish the Chinese-influenced realm of Great Liao. And then the next screenshot that you can see they're going to talk about next. So they represent the unification of the later three kingdoms via a special decision that you can see on the screen at the moment. This can be taken by any of the rulers that holds at least one kingdom and has taken over the entire peninsula in a dominant position. This decision will destroy the old kingdom titles and create an empire tier unified kingdom title, which will have two names based on the culture of the unifier. This is the only way for the Korean culture to form the Korean Empire tier title, so you're not going to be able to found that through the usual way, you know, get some kingdoms, get enough land, then just create the Empire title. You can only do that through this major decision. This decision also creates the Yongseong throne, a special primogeniture kingdom tier titular title similar to the throne seen in Japan. The name of this title will also vary based on the culture of the person who takes this decision. This also increases the cultural acceptance between your culture and the other Korean cultures, making it easier to create a new hybridized Korean culture, unifying the three cultures that are there at the start of the game. So you're going to be able to get that Korean Empire title, and then also you can create the Korean culture. Now, it doesn't create that culture, it just makes it a lot easier for you to be able to hybridize towards it. So this is another area similar to Nomads where you're going to want to have a previous DLC so you can actually hybridize this together. We've talked about this previously on some live streams. I really hope in a way they move the hybridization culture system into the base game, because so many mechanics in later DLC now use this. I say so many, there's basically like, what, 2 or 3 mechanics that use it, but it is such an important part of Nomads, and it looks like for Korea, it's going to be very much needed. I kind of wish it got moved into the base game. We'll see if they do that. I doubt they will, but it is a little bit harsh, I guess, if you buy only this DLC, and then you have to go buy an older DLC just to get the hybridized culture system. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, but I do hope they do that. I doubt they will, but you know, there is always hope. In the next screenshot, you can see how the kingdom looks in 1178. The map and everything you see here is still work in progress, but I think we can all agree it's looking really nice. It's going to be really fun to play here by the looks of it. The new Unified Kingdom title also gains a unique acclamation-style succession law, which is weighted towards the ruling dynasty of the throne. This leaves open the historical possibility of a powerful family taking control of the state from the royalty, as happened historically by the later start dates of the game. So you're going to be able to kind of recreate that, hopefully, using this succession type and seeing if you can play it out as it did historically. The last thing they're really going to talk about here is the Meritocratic government. Along with the Korean realms, there are other realms that also have this government type. You can see them on the screen now. All that area above the Celestial that was covered last week, and then obviously the Japanese government type that was covered today, and also the nomadic one that just came in, and then I guess you can see that light blue government type. That must be the Southeast Asia one that they're going to talk about in the future. So all these realms around Korea and in the north of China use a government type very similar to Chinese Celestial, but it is going to be known as the Meritocratic. This government type represents the largely admin-focused governments of this area due to the proximity to China, the interference of China, or even their aspirations to take over the mandate of heaven and rule China themselves. The meritocratic government retains the noble families, estates, merit, and examinations of the celestial government type, promoting their bureaucrats to governorships via a similar system, but may not hold imperial examinations of the highest tier. When other forms of government transition into admin via decision, if they are near to celestial China, they tend to adopt meritocratic rather than the standard admin type. So this does sound like it's going to play out very similar to the Chinese government type. It almost has me wondering why they even did it. I guess they wanted the China thing to stand out on top of everything else, and then meritocratic is just that one step lower than it. It is cool how they've changed that admin government type decision to change. If you are near China, it will form one of these versions than just standard admin government type. So I guess with all this implemented and the extra map space that we're going to get in this DLC, admin government type kind of takes over as the primary government type you're going to interact with in the game. I think so. Let me know what you think in the comments. But I guess with nomadic, that reduced how big tribal was. Feudal also isn't that big, neither's clan. I guess if you're playing Crusader Kings, you better like the admin government type in some variation, because all this area is going to play that way. As we've discussed previously, it's going to be interesting to know how they're going to play this out if you don't have the DLC. You'll obviously get all this bit of the map, but is all this going to be feudal and tribal? I guess that is how it's going to work. I guess China, this area that's meritocratic, and Japan will be feudal, and then everything else will be tribal. I would guess we'll find out in the future, I'm sure. And then with that, guys, the end of the dev diary here, they just call it Map Corner. I'll put them on the screen as I'm talking. This is just the different layers of the map that is currently available in the current progress of the DLC. So you can see it's like the kingdom tiers, the duchies, the counties, the cultures, things like that, and you can see them all laid out in these screenshots. So again, let me know what you think in the comments about everything we've seen, how Japan's going to work, the different government types, the houses. Do you like the fact that Korea and things kind of play just like China? Would you like for them to have got their own government type, or even just been one that currently exists in the game at the moment? Maybe had a twist on feudal instead. Obviously, historically, I guess it makes sense for it to be China-focused, but I'm not sure. This whole block of the game now all being admin government type. If you don't like that government type, you're not going to enjoy playing it in this area of the map. But with that, hit the like button if you've enjoyed today's video. Another long one here. Hopefully next week's isn't quite as long, if anything, to save my voice a little bit. Do subscribe, though, to the channel if you have enjoyed it. I'm covering Crusader Kings, all the dev diaries, all the news. I do discussion videos. I also live stream twice a week. I'm also covering EU5, all the news around that, all the dev diaries. They've got like 2 or 3 dev diaries a week. They're really ramping up the information on that game. I'm sure we'll get a release date soon. So do subscribe if you enjoy that game or you're interested in that era of history, which follows on directly. Well, in fact, it overlaps with CK3 this time round. But we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you all next time.